our way out of this, but in a very Confucian way, and we can learn our way out of this. Wow. Alright.
Hey yo, what's up you guys? So I'm coming here with another video, and again we're talking again with the Fung Brothers, looking into what they're talking about. This one is actually a long ass video because they're talking about two major topics here: Asia versus Asians from Asia versus Asian Americans, as well as China banning sissy men. So two hot topics. I'll probably break this in two videos, and with that said, shall we begin? But first, of course, if you're new to my channel, what is up? My name is Mitch, Maverick Mitch. Hey Mitch, all the Mitches, and pretty much I like talking about what I talk about. So current events, reviews, pop culture within the scope of entertainment, culture, and purpose. So TV, movie reviews, social, political commentary. Be sure to check out all those videos as you're finishing this video. Right quick, before we actually get into it, just really quick thoughts, and I'm gonna dissect these videos and add more commentary. But Asia versus Asian Americans, I think that is a very I saw a little part of this, right, and Drew talks about it, and this isn't the first time we have this discussion, right, and it's not just within the Asian, I think this is very specific with the Asian American community, less the Latinos, less like African Americans. Obviously Africans from Africa are vastly different from black African Americans here in the US. But for the Asian American identity, because there are still plenty of us who are still either first or second generation Asian Americans, and if not, like people still coming here directly from Asia, I think there's this idea of where do we lose our Asianness? What part do we actually fall into Americans? And I think this is very unique with the Asian American community versus other ethnicity in America. At least. Maybe there's other ones. Maybe like people from Europe, France, they or whatever European country may have that same issue. But as far as this discussion has always been made, and you know, I also watched The Expanse. You know, this issue will transcend outside of the Asian community in the future. Like at what point when we start colonizing the solar system. Especially if you watch the Expanse, the Belters, right? The Belters are like, they identify not as Earth or Mars, you know? And so at what point do we as humans in the future feel like we're no longer people of Earth or people of Mars, right? And so that's just a larger conversation going back into at what point of leaving the Asian country do we no longer feel Asian, right? And like, yeah, and so I think this is, it's kind of like personal investment into your culture. Like I feel, even though like I'm a 1.5 first generation, I feel still strongly very American, but still very tied to my Filipino heritage. So that's just me. And then going with the China ban, real quick on that note, you know, it'll be interesting. This is why I really want to do the video. I really wanted to hear what they got to say about the China ban and the sissy men and everything, because I wonder if they are actually going to be red-pilled. And if they are like starting to think like, well, I'm all for social justice, but I have to talk against this stuff. I have to talk against the CCP, you know. And the only people that's talking about this against the CCP is the conservative side. So like, are they gonna get red pilled by having these discussions? Are they gonna get red pilled? So again, we'll go into it, have more discussions, and then probably break this video again down into two parts. And let's get into it.
Welcome everybody to the Hot Pot Boys. We got David, Andrew, Nelson Chan in the building.
Hey, we finally got Hot Pot for the Hot Pot Boys to talk about some hot topics.
You know, the studio is great, but sometimes you gotta take it to the source. Hey, very excited because we're here at Da Long Yi, one of only 2 locations in America. It's a hot pot chain straight from Sichuan. One of the best hot pots in the world, guys. So today, we got 2 spicy topics for you over the spicy broth. Woo. The first one is pitting Asians from Asia versus Asian Americans on how much to care about Hollywood representation. Basically, you know, I'm not saying, you know, everybody feels one way or the other, but recently there have been some high-profile Asians born and raised in Asia saying, man, Asian Americans, why do you guys even care about Hollywood? I don't care. I don't care about appropriation. I don't care about any of this stuff. You guys aren't even Asian.
And based on that, I just want to say I'm so tired of seeing on TikTok that Asian Americans telling a white person or a black person or anyone in general that's not Asian to stop culture appropriating our culture. I mean, first of all, you're Americans. Like, if you go to China, if you go to Hong Kong, Japan, yeah, you look like us, but you're American.
And that, of course, is causing a lot of Asian Americans to clap back and be like, hold up, why do you get to put that on me? You don't know our struggle, etc.
We're talking about thousands of comments from Asian Americans on the internet going against these people. Topic number 2, we're talking about China bans. Of course, you know, it feels like we're talking about China bans last week, China bans this week. Certain headlines go more or less viral. This one happens to go really viral. It's called China bans sissy men on TV.
All right, so what we got to do is we're going to talk about what that actually means and if it's actually true, and if so, how true.
Yeah, no. Do you know where the other Da Long Yi location is in the U.S.?
I mean, in the other big Asian community, the 626 St. Gabriel.
So yeah, hey guys, by the way, we're about to get into this food before we get into those topics. Da Long Yi only exists in New York's Chinatown and St. Gabriel in the 626.
Which is like LA's new Chinatown, basically.
Guys, very excited to cover these topics over some mala broth, but let's get into it. Let's eat. Now that we got some food in our belly, we got to talk about the first topic, and we got to get into this because there's a lot of Asians from Asia that are stepping up, and this was sparked by a TikToker who came out and they made this video kind of saying essentially that she didn't care about appropriation, guys. It's all about appreciation, that anytime someone wears like a Chinese cheapao, it's a compliment. Culture is meant to be shared, which I agree with that statement.
CK Lamb, but she basically said that Asian Americans don't have any right to police Asian culture because they're not even Asian.
Right.
Which is the thing that sparked thousands of comments, and then other people kind of came out of the woodwork going, I don't care about Shang-Chi, I don't care about Asians in Hollywood. Hollywood's a white system made by white people for white people. I just only like watching Japanese, Korean, Chinese movies. I don't care about any of this.
I do want to say that,
And it sparked an internet war.
you know what's funny? This debate is actually not super new, though. It's always happened where there's always kind of sometimes been this rift between Asians in Asia and how they feel about people appropriating the culture. They don't take as much offense to it. Maybe it's because they're in Asia and they have all the Asian media representation, all the faces are out there, while they're just like, yeah, we have our faces out there. Why we don't need our faces here, only if they're good.
No, what is your major takeaway on this rift? Because we're talking about thousands of comments on both sides. I would say maybe more over.
So okay, throwing in some comments here, like even in the Filipino American community, this is so prevalent, right? Like you got like your motherland Filipinos versus like your Filipino American born stuff, and so like there's already a conflict sometimes, especially growing up, because you had I don't want to use this word in a negative word, but as in like fobs versus like Filipino Americans, because I wouldn't say it was always clashing, because like even if I was in FASA, like Filipino American Student Association in college, you know, I think that kind of like merged a little bit better, just because like we're a little bit more adult about it. But like growing up, like it was hard because like you couldn't really relate. Some people, even Filipino Americans, can't even speak Tagalog, so you already have this cultural divide, right? And so one other thing going into the present in 2021, I do have friends who are in the Philippines that like really take issue with a lot of Filipino Americans because they do like these TikToks, as I mentioned, and like how you like they're like saying like, how are you gonna talk about our culture when you just straight up American? Like y'all talk about like talking that Filipino video about like the Filipino language, like why is the Filipino language so ugly, like kili kili, boo lak lak, you know, that video, whatever. And so they're like, how are you gonna like speak about this, like you Filipino born? And then on top of that, like there's people like the whole Filipinx thing, this whole Filipino woke thing, like now it's becoming problematic because the people in the Philippines are just referring to anyone who's Filipino or like North American born Filipino, this diaspora of Filipinos, y'all Filipino X, like y'all ex-Filipino type thing, you know, like it maybe not to that like hella widespread, but I have seen people, because I again, people who are talking against, especially people who are talking against Filipinx, right? Now they're using that term Filipinx and using it, like I said, to as ex-Filipinos versus just that woke section of Filipinos that believe in intersectionality and shit. And so it becomes problematic. And so like Drew was saying, this isn't a new conversation. This conversation has been had, and I don't think there's any right answers, right? Because like everyone has their both merits. So like I just want to throw in that real quick, and then let's see what they got to say.
overwhelmingly on the Asian American side, but still, it's a debate.
I think it's fair for them to individually have those type of beliefs and thinking. You know, I'm talking about the Asians in Asia because, you know, me living in Asia for like 2 years, I noticed that, you know, the Asians over there who tell me or who talk to me, like, they don't, it's not like they don't care about what happens in America or about Asian American culture, but, you know, they more so kind of focus on, you know, what they want to do in Asia or what is important to them in Asia, where, I mean, I guess it makes sense to them, but at least at the end of the day, I just hope that, you know, it's not, we're not asking them to support us, but no, at least they shouldn't go against us.
Yeah,
you know, at the end of the day, we're still all Chinese, we're still all Asian, like, you know.
Also, real quick, go ahead, watch HBO's The Warrior. It's really great. It's pretty much like a martial arts thing. It's set in the late 1800s, right before like the Chinese Exclusion Act and everything. So anyway, so one thing that was cool about that is that they have this discussion already in there. One of the kids of the mob boss, Young Jun, kind of like has this discussion. Like he can't be accepted by the Chinese, but he was born in America, but he can't be accepted by the Americans, right? So he's in this weird middle. Like obviously that's like back in the 1800s, and obviously it's dramatic and all that stuff, but I wouldn't say that's translated 100% in 2021, but there's still a level of that, right? Not 100% parallel, but like again, it kind of goes into the discussion. So yeah.
Don't hate on each other.
I think the one thing here that everybody needs to understand is that Asian representation does affect all lives, because essentially if you look Asian, whether or not you're born in Asia, you're raised there, or you're raised in America, you're born and raised here, a lot of us look similar. So on just a looks basis, it does affect everybody. And that's representation across the board. Now, I do feel it when people say, hey, culture is meant to be shared. And we've talked about these topics before about people like remaking Asian food and stuff like that. And I do think generally, if it's done out of respect and shown appreciation, and they acknowledge the history behind those foods or cultures or clothing or whatever it is, I think it is up for grabs, right? Because culture does get shared. A lot of people, even in Asia, they're using Western culture as well.
So basically, are you guys saying these, I guess, Asians from Asia that are going against the Asian American woke movement, they have a valid point, or they have a valid perspective?
They have a valid perspective, but one thing that a lot of them are overlooking is the struggle that a lot of Asian Americans go through. And we've all been through it, of like kind of fighting for your identity here, because you're a different looking American even though you're American.
I think that they're just born into like, imagine we're like trying to navigate our way up a house to the highest level of the house, right? They're born in a completely different house than we are.
Yeah.
We're born in like the Western house, which happens to be run by white looking people, right?
Sure.
And they're born into the Asia house, and they're just navigating that. So as Asians are trying to got stuck at the bottom of the White House for a while in terms of representation, and they're trying to work their way up, some people are saying, well, I grew up in the Asia house, I completely don't care about our struggle rising up that white ladder, basically, right? And they're actually being very, they're just succumbing to self-centered human nature. They're not necessarily making a crazy read or a crazy wrong or immoral read, but it is a little selfish.
Yeah.
Because obviously we are born in the Western house. We can't jump to the Eastern house. And some people say, oh, why don't you just be like Daniel Wu or Jay Park and go over there? That opportunity is not available for all of us.
Yeah.
Nell, you kind of did that. You hop back to the Asian house to go.
Like, if it's that easy.
Yeah, I see some hypocrisy in saying that in America, because as you can see in the comments, people are like, well, this woman who's saying this is in America right now. So you're Asian in America. So of course, to be honest, you probably should care a little bit about how you're perceived. I'm not saying everybody gotta go watch the movie Shang-Chi like 3 times, or you don't even have to watch it, but I just don't think that you can tell us that we're wrong for it, because basically Asian Americans go through their own identity struggles and have to struggle growing up here, while the Asian from Asia get to come here as full adults with their full identity already, and then just be like, oh, well, you guys are confused.
I would say this. I think that they're valid in sharing their perspective. I don't think they should be silenced. They're getting like 3,000 comments against them right now. Maybe I wouldn't be one of those people like leaving them hateful DMs.
I wouldn't bash them.
But literally they're being super self-centered because they're completely unconcerned with this house that they're viewing. Because they're not necessarily like, nobody's basically caring about anything that doesn't impact their own life. Because they feel like their identity's set. Obviously, a lot of Asian Americans, we're not even very good at our parents' language. You know, maybe just, 1 out of 10, 2 out of 10, 3 out of 10 level of our own fluency in our like mother tongue.
Me included.
And it's like, how can people from Asia judge that, but in the same way, I do see their cringiness at some Asian Americans being like, finally, we made it! Whereas like, no, Asia has had a ton of content locally for those domestic markets in language, or Asian American films that aren't approved by a major studio for quite some time. So I actually do think that these people, whether it's William Lee or C.K. Lam, interestingly enough, both from Hong Kong, I don't know what does that say, but I see where they're coming from. They're talking about the cringiness of like Asian Americans acting like we've never been anywhere or don't have anything until white people validate us.
Yeah, but
So actually, there's some valid points on both sides, but ultimately I'm more siding with the Asian American perspective. But there are some valid points on both sides.
You know, okay, just real quick, yeah, I like a lot of here things that I agree with, and you know, I think there's valid points on both sides, and then also just real quick what Drew was saying, and I think he wanted to jump in on this, but like, even in the Filipino Americans, like growing up, like I didn't think about this until he mentioned it, like, finding your identity, you know, I think that is very, like, in the Filipino, like, well, Asian American and Filipino, I guess, I think that rings true, and I feel sad for the people who, like me, living in Vegas, like, for a long time now, over 5-6 years now or whatever, but anyway, they lose out here in Vegas. Even though it's a large Filipino American community, they miss out on everything that I lived through. Like, obviously I'm not talking about like all the rice pride, like rice rockets and like Asian Avenue that I grew up with, but that was a portion, and that's cringe looking back. But I mean, that's the level one, right? That's where you start out with, and then you venture out, as at least I did venture out, like in college, and venture out like learning about like our history, learning about our Filipino writing, Babayan script. Me myself learning to self-write in Babayan script. I may not speak Tagalog fluently, but at least I know the Filipino writing. And yes, it's a novelty, but at least I know something. And then obviously doing Filipino dances when I was younger, and then doing it again when I'm an adult. So when it comes to the Filipino identity, I think it's a little bit easier. Not here in Vegas, but I think in California it is a lot easier because there's a lot more outlets doing it. There's so many classes that you can take Tagalog. There are Filipino art, like martial artists there, and then again Filipino dancing, whether it's folk dancing or urban dancing. You know, I think we like the Filipino cultural identity is a little bit more structured than other Asian Americans. And again, this doesn't really constitute for people in Vegas, but yeah, I think that there is that level that I didn't really go into and really put thought about it. Maybe I did in the past, but just for them to bring it up right now. So yeah.
basically the Asians from Asia, I feel like they feel like that makes Asians look weak and they don't want to. But my thing is, if you move to America, you want to understand American culture, right? And part of American culture and history is Asian American culture and history. So we have to acknowledge that. And by acknowledging that means you acknowledge the identity and the possible ups and downs it may go through, or the lack of understanding of that identity from other people. So I'm saying it's this whole larger thing. On a simplified level, I see what they're saying, but I just think that they are not thinking about it deep enough, to be honest. And that's my opinion.
And not only that, if we're really going to see movement on this, guys, it's going to take a whole team effort. Like, we're going to have to get on the same page and even agree to disagree tacitly, like internally, just to move it forward in the big picture. Because outside people, they're not going to understand all this, and it's just going to be really confusing to them. Because literally, people can't even differentiate between from Asia and Asian American in a larger, like, middle America sense. Listen, if William Lee or C.K. Lam or any of the other Asians from Asia would have said, you know what, we all need to be like Bong Joon-ho and come up with like 10, 20 parasites, that would be a way better way to come up, I would agree with them. But not only is that incredibly difficult and unlikely, but number two, it's just, they didn't make that argument. Right. You know what I mean? They were kind of like using it as an opportunity to like dump on Asian Americans, who they see are in a weak position because a lot of Americans don't consider us American, a lot of Asians don't consider us American. So we're getting disavowed by both dominant teams. So it's almost like you get put on special teams, you're not on offense or defense for any team you join. You go back to Team Asia, they're trying to put you on special teams. You know what I mean? In NFL, you want to play offense or defense. You don't want to be stuck on special teams. So it's like, I feel like we're getting they're trying to relegate us back to that role as we try to rise up. Now, to their point, I do think that sometimes Asian Americans have a cringy view of like self-identity that doesn't involve looking backwards to Asia and learning the motherland language and the history. And I would agree that that's wrong. So I think both sides got to do work, but at the end of the day, guys, we're still in this transition period where we're almost like figuring things out. Especially, I feel like we're ABCs or Asian Americans that, even though we're pretty American, we understand international culture pretty well, better than most American-born.
I didn't recognize that before. That's the first time I hear that. If he said ABCs, I would take a guess and stab it in the dark. That's Asian-born, American-born Chinese. And so that's the first time I heard that. So, but I just found that really interesting.
Of course, yeah. I just think that both parties should learn about each other's.
And it sounds crazy, and it sounds like we try to tie it up with a nice bow, but that's literally what has to happen. People have to do work. There's gonna be no figuring out this rift by just talking about it.
Right.
People actually have to go learn about each other.
No, you gotta go to Da Long Yi Hot Pot in New York or 626.
You guys, we're not gonna argue our way out of this, but in a very Confucian way, and we can learn our way out of this.
Wow. All right. Alright, hey guys, is this shrimp cooked?
Yeah.
Is it pretty firm?
The shrimp paste is, yes.
Yeah, the shrimp paste and the clams. The clams were a 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
No